Appellant at the Supreme Court was the candidate of the All Progressives Congress in the Delta State governorship election, which held last year, 2023. Senator Ovie Omo-Agege, and he released a statement urging citizens of Delta State and his supporters to accept and abide by the judgment of the Supreme Court, which he said is the final court of the land. He personally signed that statement as well. Well, joining us now to further discuss this and the entire situation as far as Supreme Court ruling is concerned is legal practitioner Libros Oshoma. Libros, good evening to you. Thank you very kindly for your time. We know you've had a busy day, but let's start this way. All the electoral victories of the incumbents, we look at Delta State, Gombe State, we look at Plateau State, and so on and so forth. Are you seeing a pure interpretation of the law by the Supreme Court that it tried as much as possible to grant the wish of the electorates?
Thank you. I will quickly say that the issue of today, actually, and just like last Friday, is the day that we'll say the election actually held in those states, because over time the main election has become ceremonial, where after the ceremonial election, we'll now wait for the re-election, which is at the Supreme Court, and it's quite unfortunate, even though the Supreme Court had consistently reiterated these same positions of the law that they reiterated today. But before I even go into that, I want to quickly touch on a piece of news you started with, which has to do with the statement issued by Senator Ovie Omo-Agege, the former Deputy Senate President. And I would say, with all sense of modesty, that for me, it's a congratulatory message after the Supreme Court judgment. It's belated, really. It's just like, rubber stamp, because after now there is nothing else to do. After now there is nothing else. I would have expected a congratulatory message. I would have saluted, the former Deputy Senate President and say he would be politically, few inches taller if he had sent that congratulatory message immediately after the election. That's how we know good sportsmanship, because it was obvious. Quickly, permit me, it was obvious from Delta State, the numbers and the polls, that Ovie Omo-Agege in Delta was not as popular as people thought he was, because, I will say this quickly, because if you look at the election in Delta, the party itself, APC, were not too happy with the antics of the APC in Delta. APC Delta North, Cairo Jubo, who was also a national leader in the party, complained bitterly. The rebels also, where Omo-Agege and the current governor, Sheriff Oborovwori, are from, also felt that Ovie Omo-Agege did not do much for Delta State, even as a Deputy Senate President, apart from all the projects that he initiated. All the projects only benefited his Orogun, village, and not even the entire Ugeli. And then lastly, some persons felt apart from him, no other person was elevated. Look at somebody like a person like Mikey Guinea from Delta. One would have expected that being a Deputy Senate President, he would have used that opportunity to even elevate the person of Mikey Guinea to the National Commissioner. All of these are the reasons why the vote went the way it went in Delta. And so, if you take it from there, I was trying to lay a foundation. If you take it for there, if you prepare for election properly, there will be no need to go to court. Look at what happened in Edo after the election of Obaseki. Even though people are not happy with Obaseki today, the candidate of the APC said, well, we're not going to go to court because the numbers were clear, the preparations were done, and the people spoke loudly.
But Libros, are you seeing these decisions as a pure interpretation of the law? Or do you see this as, the Supreme Court trying to, as much as it can, grant the wishes of the electorates? Because all of them won today. They all won the elections.
Just like last Friday. Look, let me tell you, the issue here is the fact that we expect so much from the courts that, we're expecting the court to upturn because we're used to seeing the court upturn. And then, another thing I frown at is the fact that we hear governors going to thank the president after election was judgment are delivered at the court. You go to thank the president for not interfering. What that tells me is that, the governors interfere. Everybody is used to interfering with judicial process. But to answer your question directly, what you are saying, because Supreme Court are consistently, read out this interpretation. Is it the issue of membership of political party? In the case of Peter Obi, the court reiterated that Section 77 does not apply when it has to do with post-election matter on membership of party. That is the court that the party that determine who is the member. The issue of so that rested the case of Kano. The issue of votes overvoting. The court also, the Supreme Court had laid down that position in Osun's case. What should amount to overvoting? And also, it is a notorious fact that for every election, witnesses must speak to the issues. Witnesses must breathe life into the issues adumbrated or into the fact pleaded in court. The court cannot just sit down on its own, or the judges in chamber, to begin to determine which one is which ballot papers are stamped or which ballot papers are not stamped. It is a witness that will draw the attention of the court to that. But that as it may be, Supreme Court has also said Section 63 give INEC the leverage to determine, ballot papers, even though they are not stamped, provided they are from the ballot paper, the booklet of ballot papers issued by INEC. So all of these things are interpretations of the court that the court has, consistently followed. But just unfortunate that because politicians are used to going to court to give hope to their supporters.
Okay.
And so when that happens, it becomes like we're expecting the court to do magic. Elections should be determined by the people and not the courts.
All right. But looking at the, since the litigation started post-elections, a lot of tribunal judgments and even appeal court judgments have come under, criticism from a cross-section of Nigerians. With this latest set of governorship election petition judgments, would you say, how is it impacted on the public perception and the reputation of the judiciary in the eyes of Nigerians?
Yeah, last Friday, the Supreme Court came down heavily on some judges of the Court of Appeal. And what that also brings to the fore is the fact that we need to begin to look at how judges are appointed and how judges are elevated to the Court of Appeal. Remember, Olumide Akpata, as NBA national president, did also raise alarm, when he spoke about the elevation of judges to the Court of Appeal and the interview conducted, how some of them, he didn't feel that some of them should have even merited that list. Professor Chidi Odinkalu also talked about the NJC and the appointment of judges, where judges, appointment of judges is almost becoming, a family affair where children of judges and the wives of judges are elevated as judges. So the quality of judges that we elevate and appoint will determine the quality of judgment that we get. And that's why, look at unfortunate scenario that played out in Plateau. All of the House of Assembly members now the election has been nullified, the PDP members have been nullified on a premise or on a conclusion reached by Court of Appeal, which has been nullified, which have been overturned by the Supreme Court. And so, yet, the time for determining appeal at that level had lapsed, and you can no longer take appeal from that level to the Supreme Court for election, for matters that have to do with election, bordering on the House of Assembly, House of Rep, and Senate. And so, yes, there's a miscarriage of justice. And also, lastly, on this, that's why we need to also consistently insist that INEC should mean what they say and write what they mean. Not a situation where INEC comes on air to say a different thing and their electoral guidelines say purely a different thing. A situation where you say you want to transmit the election result online real time, and yet your regulation 93 is saying a different thing altogether, that collation shall be manual. So when you have this inconsistency, it also affects the outcome of the election, and then the perception of the way people see election will be different. And rather than election being the election date proper, the ballot and the box, people will, carry out that ceremonial process and now eventually be waiting on the court to determine their fate, which is quite unfortunate.
Quite interesting development, Celebros, and of course, we have come to an interesting juncture in the post-election litigation. Well, let's see what happens going forward, but it's been a pleasure having you tonight on the program.
My pleasure, too.
Thank you very much.